History often remembers emperors, generals, and conquerors. Their names echo across centuries, carved into monuments and written into countless books. Yet behind many of history's greatest rulers stood thinkers whose wisdom shaped the decisions that changed the world. One such figure was Arius Didymus, a philosopher whose influence reached the highest levels of power in ancient Rome. Unlike Julius Caesar, Augustus, or Marcus Aurelius, Arius Didymus did not command armies. He did not rule vast territories. He left behind no great empire bearing his name. Yet his ideas traveled through the halls of power, influencing the man who would become Rome's first emperor. His story is not one of military victories or political intrigue alone. It is the story of a scholar who believed that wisdom mattered, that reason could guide human life, and that philosophy was not merely an academic exercise, but a practical tool for governing the world. To understand Arius Didymus, we must travel back more than 2,000 years to a Mediterranean world undergoing dramatic transformation. The Roman Republic was collapsing. Civil wars had torn the state apart. Ambitious leaders fought for supremacy. Cities trembled under uncertainty. Old traditions seemed fragile, and many people wondered whether stability would ever return. It was during this turbulent age that Arius Didymus emerged as one of the most respected intellectuals of his time. Born in Alexandria, Egypt, sometime during the 1st century BCE, Arius entered a city unlike any other in the ancient world. Alexandria was a beacon of learning. Founded by Alexander the Great centuries earlier, it had become a center of culture, science, philosophy, and scholarship. The city housed the legendary Library of Alexandria, a place where scholars gathered from across the known world. Philosophers debated ideas, mathematicians explored new theories, and scientists investigated nature's mysteries. Growing up in such an environment profoundly shaped Arius. Knowledge surrounded him, questions filled the air, the pursuit of wisdom was considered one of life's highest goals. From an early age, Arius displayed an extraordinary intellectual curiosity. While many sought wealth or political advancement, he was drawn toward philosophy. He wanted to understand the nature of reality, the meaning of virtue, and the principles that governed human behavior. The philosophical landscape of his era was rich and diverse. Stoics taught that virtue was the highest good and that individuals should live according to reason. Peripatetics, following the teachings of Aristotle, emphasized observation, logic, and practical wisdom. Other schools offered their own answers to humanity's deepest questions. Rather than blindly following a single tradition, Arius immersed himself in multiple philosophical systems. He studied their strengths and weaknesses, seeking truth wherever it could be found. This broad intellectual approach would later make him exceptionally valuable as an advisor. A ruler needed more than abstract theories. A ruler needed practical wisdom. Arius understood both. As his reputation grew, he became known as a philosopher of remarkable learning. His scholarship was respected across intellectual circles. He developed expertise in ethics, politics, and human nature. What made him unique was his ability to connect philosophy with real life. Many thinkers spent their days discussing abstract concepts disconnected from everyday concerns. Arius believed philosophy should help people live better lives. Wisdom should guide action. Ideas mattered because people mattered. This conviction eventually brought him into contact with one of history's most important figures, Octavian, the young man who would later become Augustus. At the time, Rome stood at a crossroads. Julius Caesar had been assassinated. Power struggles consumed the Republic. Political alliances formed and collapsed with alarming speed. Violence and uncertainty dominated public life. Octavian emerged as one of the key contenders in the struggle for control. Though young, he possessed extraordinary ambition and intelligence. Yet ambition alone could not build a lasting government. Leadership required wisdom. Leadership required judgment. Leadership required an understanding of human nature. Somewhere during this transformative period, Arius Didymus became closely associated with Octavian. Ancient sources indicate that he served as an advisor and intellectual companion. The relationship appears to have been built on mutual respect. The philosopher saw potential in the future emperor. The future emperor recognized the value of wisdom. Their partnership would prove significant. Arius was not merely a court intellectual providing entertainment through clever conversation. He appears to have played a genuine advisory role, offering guidance grounded in philosophical principles. Imagine the scene. The Roman world is changing rapidly. Political rivals threaten stability. Decisions affecting millions of lives must be made. And in private discussions, a philosopher from Alexandria helps shape the thinking of the man who will soon rule the Mediterranean world. The influence of philosophy on politics is often subtle. Ideas rarely march into history wearing uniforms. Instead, they work quietly. They shape perspectives. They influence decisions. They alter priorities. Arius Didymus contributed to this invisible process. One famous story illustrates both his influence and the harsh realities of Roman politics. After the defeat of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, Augustus faced difficult choices regarding those associated with his enemies. According to ancient accounts, Arius reportedly advised Augustus concerning certain political figures. Whether every detail of these stories is accurate remains debated among historians, but they reveal how closely the philosopher was connected to the highest levels of decision-making. He was trusted. His opinions mattered. His words carried weight. Yet Arius was more than an advisor. He was also a scholar dedicated to preserving and organizing philosophical knowledge. One of his most important contributions involved compiling summaries of philosophical doctrines. Ancient philosophy produced vast amounts of literature, much of which has been lost over time. Through the work of scholars like Arius, valuable ideas survived. He examined different philosophical schools and recorded their teachings. His writings helped preserve intellectual traditions that might otherwise have disappeared. In this sense, Arius served not only his own generation, but future generations as well. Knowledge is fragile. Books can burn. Empires can collapse. Civilizations can disappear. Yet ideas endure when people dedicate themselves to preserving them. Arius was one of those people. Fragments of his work survive through later authors, particularly the writer Stobaeus. These surviving texts provide precious glimpses into his intellectual world. They reveal a thinker deeply concerned with ethics. What does it mean to live well? How should individuals conduct themselves? What responsibilities accompany power? What role does reason play in human life? These questions remain relevant even today. The centuries separating us from Arius have changed technology, politics, and culture, but human nature remains remarkably familiar. People still struggle with ambition. People still seek happiness. People still wrestle with questions of morality and purpose. The philosophical reflections preserved by Arius continue speaking across time because they address enduring aspects of the human condition. His intellectual outlook combined elements of Stoicism and Aristotelian thought. From the Stoics came an emphasis on virtue, self-control, and rationality. From Aristotle came an appreciation for practical wisdom and careful observation. This combination created a balanced approach. Life required principles, but life also required judgment. Rules alone were insufficient. Wisdom involved understanding circumstances and applying reason effectively. Such ideas were especially important for leaders. An emperor could not rely solely on force. Military power might secure obedience, but lasting stability required something more. It required legitimacy. It required justice. It required wise governance. Arius understood this. Perhaps that is why Augustus valued his counsel. The reign of Augustus transformed Rome. After decades of turmoil, relative peace returned. Institutions were reorganized, economic growth expanded, the foundations of the Roman Empire were established. Of course, no single advisor deserves credit for these achievements. History is always more complicated than that. Yet thoughtful advisors contribute to thoughtful leadership. Ideas influence actions. Counsel shapes decisions. And Arius Didymus was among the intellectual figures who helped guide Rome through a pivotal chapter in its history. Despite his proximity to power, he remained fundamentally a philosopher. This distinction matters. Power often attracts those seeking personal advancement. Philosophy, at its best, seeks truth. The relationship between wisdom and power has always been complicated. Sometimes rulers ignore philosophers. Sometimes philosophers become corrupted by influence. The partnership between Arius and Augustus appears to have avoided these extremes. The philosopher offered guidance. The ruler exercised authority. Together they represented an ancient ideal, wisdom informing power. As the years passed, Arius continued his scholarly work. He remained respected within intellectual circles. Students and fellow thinkers recognized his learning. His writings circulated among those interested in philosophy. Yet, like many ancient scholars, much of his work eventually disappeared. The loss is tragic. Countless texts from antiquity have vanished. Libraries burned, manuscripts decayed, wars destroyed cultural treasures. The survival of any ancient writing is something of a miracle. That fragments of Arius's work remain today is remarkable. Through those fragments, we can still hear echoes of his voice. We can glimpse his concerns. We can appreciate his dedication to understanding the world. And we can recognize the value he placed on wisdom. There is something profoundly moving about this. More than 2,000 years ago, a philosopher sat in Alexandria and Rome, reflecting on questions that continue to matter. How should we live? What makes a good leader? How can reason guide human behavior? What responsibilities accompany power? These questions remain unanswered in any final sense. Each generation must confront them anew. Each individual must wrestle with them personally. Arius Didymus devoted his life to that pursuit. He believed that philosophy was not a luxury reserved for scholars. It was a necessity, a guide for life, a tool for understanding, a path toward wisdom. His legacy may not be celebrated with grand monuments. Tourists do not flock to enormous statues bearing his likeness. Movies are not made about his adventures. Yet influence cannot always be measured by fame. Some people shape history quietly. Their contributions occur behind the scenes. Their ideas enter the minds of leaders, students, and future generations. Arius belonged to this category. He was a thinker in an age of upheaval, a scholar in a world of politics, a philosopher standing near the center of power while remaining devoted to the pursuit of wisdom. As the Roman Empire entered a new era under Augustus, Arius Didymus represented the enduring importance of intellectual guidance. He reminded rulers that strength without wisdom is dangerous. He reminded scholars that knowledge should serve life. He reminded humanity that reason remains one of our greatest tools. Today, when we look back across the centuries, we find not merely an ancient philosopher, but a timeless example of the value of thoughtful reflection. Empires rise and fall, governments change, technologies transform civilization. Yet the search for wisdom continues. In that ongoing journey, Arius Didymus still has something to teach us. His life demonstrates that ideas matter, that learning matters, that thoughtful counsel can influence the course of history, and perhaps most importantly, that true greatness is not always found in those who hold power, but sometimes in those who help power find its direction. The story of Arius Didymus is therefore not only the story of a philosopher, it is the story of wisdom itself, a quiet force moving through history, guiding leaders, preserving knowledge, inspiring generations, and proving that even in the shadow of emperors, a philosopher can leave a legacy that endures for millennia.